"Please don't hurt me. My heart is already broken," said native woman. What lonely rancher did next. The ranch stood alone against a wide stretch of open land where the wind never seemed to rest. Every morning began the same way for the man who lived there. He woke before sunrise, stepped onto the porch with a mug of warm coffee, and watched the sky slowly turn from dark blue to pale gold. The quiet was something he had grown used to. Some people might have called it peaceful, but for him, it was simply empty. His name was Daniel. He was known in the nearest town as the quiet rancher who kept to himself. He did not talk much, and when he did, his words were careful and slow. Years ago, people used to see him smile more, but time had changed that. Loss had shaped him into someone who preferred silence over conversation. The ranch became his refuge, a place where he could work without thinking too deeply about the past. That evening felt colder than usual. The wind moved through the tall grass, bending it in soft waves. Daniel finished repairing a fence post and wiped the dust from his hands. The sun was lowering behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He turned toward the barn when something caught his attention. At the far edge of his property, near the fence line, stood a figure. At first, he thought it was a shadow, or maybe a traveler passing through. But as he looked closer, he saw it was a woman. She stood still, almost as if she did not know whether to step forward or walk away. Her clothes were worn from travel, and her long, dark hair moved gently in the wind.
Daniel felt a small wave of concern.
It was rare for strangers to appear without warning, especially out here where the land stretched for miles without neighbors. He walked slowly toward her, careful not to startle her. When he came closer, he noticed how tired she looked. Her eyes held a deep sadness that seemed older than her years. She watched him with caution, her shoulders tense, as if she expected him to send her away. He stopped a few steps away, keeping his distance so she would feel safe. "Are you lost?" he asked gently. For a moment she said nothing. Her lips moved slightly, but no sound came out. Finally she spoke in a quiet voice that carried both fear and exhaustion. "Please don't hurt me. My heart is already broken." The words hung in the air between them. Daniel felt something shift inside him. He had heard many things in his life, but there was a softness in her voice that told him she was not just tired. She was carrying something heavy inside. "Ha ha! I'm not going to hurt you," he replied calmly. "You look cold." "Do you need help?" She hesitated, glancing toward the open land behind her, as if expecting someone to appear. After a long pause, she nodded slightly. Daniel gestured toward the house. "You can come inside. I have food and a warm place to sit." She followed slowly, keeping a careful distance. Every movement she made suggested she was unsure of trusting anyone. Daniel understood that feeling. Trust was not something given easily. It was built slowly, step by step. Inside the house, the warmth from the fireplace welcomed them. The space was simple: wooden walls, a sturdy table, and a few personal items placed neatly around the room. Nothing unnecessary, nothing loud or distracting. It reflected the man who lived there. The woman sat quietly at the edge of a chair while Daniel prepared a bowl of soup. He placed it in front of her without saying much. She stared at it for a moment, almost as if she was surprised by the kindness. Then she began to eat slowly, careful and polite. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded. "You can rest here for a while." A silence settled between them, but it was not uncomfortable. The crackling of the fire filled the room. Daniel noticed that she watched everything closely. The door, the windows, even his movements. It reminded him of someone who had learned to be careful with the world. "What's your name?" he asked after some time. She hesitated again, as if deciding how much to share. "Elena," she finally said. He introduced himself simply, then returned to fixing the loose hinge on a cabinet, giving her space to feel at ease. As the evening deepened, Elena began to relax slightly. The tension in her shoulders softened. She looked around the house, her eyes stopping on small details. A framed photograph, a worn saddle near the door, a guitar leaning against the wall. "You live here alone?" she asked quietly. "Yes." Her gaze lingered on the photograph. but she did not ask about it. Daniel appreciated that. Some questions did not need to be spoken. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Elena flinched slightly at the sudden sound, and Daniel noticed. "You're safe here," he said gently. She nodded, though her expression suggested that safety was not something she believed easily. Later, he showed her a small room where she could rest. The bed was simple but clean, with warm blankets folded neatly at the foot. "If you need anything, just ask," he told her before leaving the door slightly open so she would not feel trapped. That night, Daniel sat by the fire longer than usual. He wondered about the stranger who had appeared at his fence line. Something about her presence felt familiar, not in memory, but in emotion. He recognized the quiet pain in her eyes because he had seen it in his own reflection many times. In the guest room, Elena lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The sounds of the ranch were unfamiliar yet comforting. The distant movement of horses, the whisper of wind through the trees. She had not expected kindness when she walked toward the fence earlier that day. She had only hoped for a place where no one would push her away. As the night passed, both of them carried their own thoughts. Two strangers under one roof, connected by unspoken wounds. The next morning began with soft sunlight filtering through the windows. Daniel prepared breakfast while Elena watched from the doorway, unsure whether she should help or remain a guest. Eventually, she stepped forward and quietly offered to set the table. He accepted with a nod. Small moments like that began to create a sense of normalcy. He did not ask about her past, and she did not offer details. Instead, they spoke about simple things: the weather, the land, the horses. Elena showed a surprising familiarity with outdoor life, moving around the ranch with natural ease. When she smiled briefly at something he said, Daniel felt the heaviness in the air lighten just a little. But beneath the calm surface, questions remained. Why had she come here? What had broken her heart so deeply that her first words were a plea not to be heard again? As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Daniel realized something important. The quiet routine that once felt empty now held a new energy. The ranch no longer felt like a place frozen in time. And somewhere inside him, a small part that had been closed for years began to open again, slowly, carefully, like a door pushed by a gentle breeze. Far beyond the fence line, the open land stretched endlessly, carrying the promise that their meeting was not an accident but the beginning of a story neither of them had expected. Morning came slowly across the ranch, bringing soft light over the fields and hills. Daniel stepped outside with his usual cup of coffee, but this time he was not alone in the silence. He sensed someone watching from the doorway behind him. When he turned slightly, he saw Elena standing there, wrapped in a warm jacket he had left near the door. She looked unsure, as if she did not know whether she was allowed to join him. He nodded toward the empty chair beside him. She stepped forward quietly and sat down, her eyes moving across the land as if trying to understand it. "It's beautiful here," she said softly.
"It keeps things simple," he replied. They sat without speaking for a while.
The quiet between them felt easier than before. The night had passed without trouble, and something had shifted. A small layer of fear had begun to fade. After breakfast, Daniel returned to his work, expecting Elena to rest or stay inside. Instead, she followed him outside and watched carefully as he checked the fences and fed the horses. When he handed her a small bucket without thinking, she took it naturally, helping as if she had done ranch work before. "You've done this before?" he asked. She nodded slightly. "A long time ago." He did not ask for more details. He understood that stories were not always ready to be told. As the day continued, Elena moved through the ranch with quiet confidence. She brushed one of the horses gently, speaking to it in a calm voice that surprised Daniel. The animal responded well, lowering its head as if recognizing kindness. "You're good with them," he said. "They listen when you're honest," she replied. Her words felt deeper than they sounded. Daniel noticed that she often chose her words carefully, as if every sentence carried meaning. By afternoon, the ranch felt different. The sound of another person moving around the property broke the heavy stillness that had lived there for years. Daniel found himself noticing small things: The way she paused to look at the sky, the way she smiled faintly when the wind moved through the grass. But he also noticed moments when her expression darkened. Sometimes she would stop suddenly, her eyes distant, as if remembering something painful. He chose patience. Later that day they drove into town to pick up supplies. Elena seemed nervous when they arrived. She stayed close to him, her shoulders slightly tense. The small store owner greeted Daniel warmly, but glanced curiously at the woman beside him.
"New helper?" the man asked casually. Daniel shrugged.
"Just someone staying at the ranch for now." Elena lowered her gaze, avoiding attention.
Inside the store, she walked slowly through the aisles, touching items carefully as if unsure she had permission.
Daniel noticed and quietly placed a few extra things in the cart. Warm clothes, fresh fruit, simple comforts. When she saw them later, she looked surprised.
"You didn't have to do that. I know,"
he said simply. The words seemed to touch her deeply. As they left the store, a woman from town stared at Elena for a moment, her expression shifting from curiosity to recognition. Elena froze slightly, her breath catching. "Is everything okay?" Daniel asked quietly once they reached the truck. She nodded, but her hands trembled slightly. The drive back to the ranch was silent. The peaceful feeling from earlier had faded, replaced by tension. Daniel sensed that something from her past had followed her here. That evening, Elena worked in the kitchen, preparing a simple meal. She moved with focus, as if staying busy helped her avoid thinking too much. Daniel watched quietly, unsure whether to ask questions. After dinner, they sat by the fire. The light flickered softly against the walls. Elena stared into the flames for a long time before speaking. "People don't forget easily," she said. "No," he agreed. "They also don't forgive easily." Daniel did not respond immediately. He understood that she was not speaking about strangers, but about someone specific. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to," he said gently. She nodded, grateful for the space. Over the next few days, their routine began to form naturally. Elena woke early and helped with chores without being asked. She repaired small things around the house, cooked meals, and brought a quiet warmth to the ranch that Daniel had not realized he missed. Sometimes they talked while working. She told him small pieces of her life, growing up close to nature, learning from elders, finding strength in traditions that valued patience and respect. She spoke carefully, never revealing too much at once. Daniel shared less about himself, but he listened well. That alone made her feel safe. One afternoon, while fixing a broken gate together, she laughed at something unexpected. The sound surprised both of them. It was light and real, a moment free from the heaviness she carried.
"You should do that more," Daniel said.
"Laugh?" she asked. "Yes." She smiled faintly, but did not answer. Later that week, a neighbor stopped by unexpectedly. He spoke to Daniel outside, but his eyes moved toward Elena standing near the barn. "I think I've seen her before," the neighbor said quietly. "You sure everything's all right?"
Daniel felt a protective instinct rise within him.
"She's fine," he replied firmly. The neighbor nodded but left with a curious expression. When Daniel returned inside, he found Elena standing by the window, her face pale. "People talk," she said. "They always do," he replied. She looked at him carefully. "You don't know what they might say. I'm not worried about that." His calm confidence seemed to steady her. That night she sat outside alone, looking up at the stars. Daniel joined her without speaking. After a long silence, she said softly, "I didn't expect kindness when I came here." "Neither did I," he admitted. She turned toward him, surprised. He continued, "I thought my life was set, quiet, alone. But sometimes things change." She studied his face, searching for judgment, but found none. Days turned into a rhythm filled with shared work and quiet understanding. Elena began to walk with more confidence, her movements less guarded. She sang softly while working one morning, and Daniel listened from a distance, feeling the ranch come alive in a way it never had before. But beneath the growing peace, tension remained. The look from the woman in town and the neighbor's curiosity reminded them both that the outside world had not forgotten her. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Elena stood by the fence where they had first met. She ran her hand along the wood slowly. "I almost didn't come here," she said when Daniel joined her. "Why did you?" She took a deep breath. "Because I had nowhere else to go." Her honesty filled the space between them. "And now?" he asked gently. She looked at the land stretching endlessly before them. "No, I don't feel invisible anymore." The words stayed with him long after she walked back towards the house. Part 2 closed with a quiet but powerful realization. Two broken people were beginning to find balance together. The ranch was no longer just a place of survival. It was becoming a place where healing could begin. Yet the shadows of Elena's past were moving closer, and both of them knew that peace would not remain untouched forever. The days after their trip to town carried a quiet tension that neither Daniel nor Elena could ignore. The ranch still felt peaceful, but something invisible had changed. Elena moved more carefully now, often pausing to look toward the road, as if expecting someone to arrive. Daniel noticed every small detail, though he did not speak about it right away. He believed that trust grew best when given space. Morning work continued as usual. They checked the animals, repaired small parts of the fence, and shared meals without pressure. Yet beneath the calm routine, Elena seemed lost in thought more often. Sometimes she stopped mid-task, staring into the distance before shaking herself back to the present. One afternoon while cleaning the barn, she accidentally dropped a metal tool. The loud sound echoed through the space, and she reacted quickly, stepping back with a look of fear in her eyes. Daniel walked over slowly. "It's okay," he said gently. She nodded, but her hands trembled slightly. For a moment she looked embarrassed, as if she wished she had reacted differently. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You don't need to apologize," he replied. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. He returned to his work without pushing for explanations. That small act of patience seemed to ease her more than any question could. Later that evening, they sat outside watching the sunset. The sky turned soft shades of pink and gold, and the wind moved quietly across the fields. Elena wrapped her arms around herself as if gathering courage. "I think you should know something," she said. Daniel turned slightly toward her but kept his expression calm. "I'm listening." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "The people in town. Some of them might remember me. Not in a good way." He nodded slowly. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to share."
"I want to,"
she said quietly. "I just don't know where to start." They sat in silence for a few moments before she continued. "I used to live in a place where I thought I belonged," she said. "But sometimes people only see what they want to see. They don't see the truth behind someone's actions." Her voice held sadness but also strength. She was not asking for pity. She was telling her story so he could understand. "There was someone," she said after a pause. "Someone I trusted." When things fell apart, people chose sides without knowing what really happened. It became easier for me to leave than to stay and explain. Daniel listened without interruption. He knew that listening could be more powerful than speaking. "I didn't run away because I did something wrong," she added quietly. "I left because staying felt like disappearing." Her words settled deeply in the quiet air. "Sometimes people judge too quickly," he said softly. She nodded. "I learned that the hard way." The fireflies began to appear around them, small lights flickering in the growing darkness. Elena watched them, her expression thoughtful. "I walked for days before I reached your fence," she said. "I didn't have a plan. I just kept moving." Daniel thought back to that first moment, her standing there, unsure whether to trust him. He felt grateful that she had chosen to stay. Over the next few days, Elena began to share more pieces of her past. She spoke about her family, about traditions that taught patience and resilience. She talked about feeling strong in some moments and completely lost in others. Every story revealed another layer of who she was. Daniel also found himself opening up more than he expected. One evening he spoke about the years when the ranch felt too quiet, about how loneliness could become heavy if left unchecked. Elena listened carefully, her eyes gentle. "You understand more than you say," she told him. "Maybe," he replied. As their connection deepened, the ranch felt warmer. Laughter appeared more often, and small moments of joy replaced some of the silence. Yet outside their peaceful world, whispers began to grow. One afternoon, a truck slowed near the edge of the property before driving away. Elena saw it from the window and grew tense. "Do you know who that was?" she asked. "No," Daniel said, though he felt uneasy. Later, a neighbor stopped by again, pretending to ask about supplies but clearly curious about Elena's presence. Daniel remained calm but firm, making it clear that she was welcome there. After the neighbor left, Elena looked troubled. "I don't want to cause problems for you," she said. "You're not a problem," he answered simply. She studied his face, searching for doubt, but found only quiet certainty. That night, she could not sleep. Memories from her past seemed closer than ever. She stepped outside and sat near the fence, watching the stars. Daniel joined her a few minutes later without saying anything. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Of what? That my past will follow me here and take away the peace I found?" Daniel considered her words carefully. "Peace isn't something someone else can take unless we let them," he said gently. She looked at him, unsure whether she believed that yet. The next day brought a moment that changed everything. While they were working near the barn, a car drove up the long dirt road toward the house. Elena froze, her face pale. Daniel stepped forward instinctively, positioning himself between her and the approaching vehicle without thinking. The car stopped, and a person stepped out. Someone Elena clearly recognized. Her breathing grew shallow, and she gripped the fence tightly. "It's okay," Daniel said quietly. The visitor approached slowly, speaking calmly but with an air of seriousness. The conversation that followed was tense but not aggressive. The visitor spoke about misunderstandings, about things left unresolved. Elena listened without responding at first. Finally, she spoke with quiet strength. "I left because I needed to survive emotionally. That hasn't changed." Her voice did not shake this time. Daniel watched with quiet pride as she stood firm, no longer the frightened woman he had met weeks earlier. After the visitor left, Elena exhaled deeply, as if releasing a weight she had carried for too long. "I thought I would feel small again," she said.
"But I don't."
"That's because you're not," Daniel replied. As evening fell, they walked back toward the house together. The ranch felt different, not just a place of hiding, but a place where truth could exist without fear.
Elena realized that sharing her story had not made her weaker.
Instead, it gave her control over her own narrative. Daniel realized that standing beside her felt natural, as if he had been waiting for someone to bring life back into his quiet world. The third part closed with a powerful sense of transformation. The truth had begun to come out, not as drama, but as healing. Elena was no longer just a stranger seeking shelter. She was becoming someone ready to face her past with strength. And Daniel, once content to live alone, was discovering that protecting someone's peace could also restore his own. The days after the unexpected visit brought a quiet shift across the ranch. The air felt heavier at first, as if the land itself was waiting to see what would happen next. Elena moved through her work with determination, but Daniel noticed that she paused more often, deep in thought. She was no longer running from her past, but facing it required strength that did not come easily. Early one morning, they walked together toward the far pasture to check the fence line. The sky was clear, and a cool breeze moved through the tall grass. Elena walked beside him without speaking, her gaze focused ahead. "You were brave yesterday," Daniel said gently after a while. She let out a slow breath. "I didn't feel brave. I felt tired of being afraid." He nodded. "Sometimes that's what courage looks like." She considered his words carefully. Over the past weeks, she had begun to see herself differently. The woman who had stood at his fence asking not to be hurt felt like a distant version of herself, though the pain was still real. As they worked, Elena found herself thinking about the visitor who had come to the ranch. The conversation had not been loud or dramatic, but it had brought old memories back to the surface. For years she had believed that leaving was the only way to survive emotionally. Now she wondered if staying and rebuilding might be possible. Back at the house, Daniel prepared lunch while Elena cleaned the kitchen. Their movements were comfortable, almost natural, like people who had known each other for years rather than weeks. The quiet between them felt warm instead of empty. Later that afternoon, another car approached the ranch. Elena saw it first and felt her heart tighten. Daniel stepped outside calmly, ready to face whatever came. This time it was two people from town, bringing news that rumors had begun spreading. Some believed Elena had returned because of unfinished problems, while others questioned why Daniel allowed her to stay.
Elena listened silently as Daniel spoke with steady confidence.
He did not raise his voice or argue. He simply made it clear that she was welcome and safe there. After they left, Elena stood by the door, unsure how to feel. "I don't want your life to become complicated because of me," she said. Daniel shook his head. "Life is already complicated. What matters is doing what feels right." His words stayed with her long after the conversation ended. That evening, she walked alone along the edge of the property. The sky turned soft orange as the sun lowered. She remembered the first time she stood at that fence, uncertain whether she would be turned away. Now she felt rooted in a way she had not felt in years. Daniel joined her quietly. "You're thinking a lot," he said. "Yes," she replied. "I'm trying to understand who I am now. And what have you learned?" She smiled faintly. "That I'm stronger than I thought." Over the next few days, Elena began to reconnect with parts of herself she had ignored for a long time. She started painting again, using simple materials she found in the barn. She shared stories from her culture, speaking about traditions that honored patience, balance, and respect for nature. Daniel listened with genuine interest, appreciating how her presence brought new meaning to the ranch. One morning she suggested organizing a small gathering to show gratitude to the land and to mark a new beginning. Daniel agreed, even though he was not used to inviting others onto his property. They prepared together, setting up a small, outdoor space. The event was simple and respectful, focused on connection rather than attention. A few neighbors came, curious but open-minded. Elena greeted them calmly, showing confidence that surprised even herself. During the gathering, she spoke briefly about healing, not as something dramatic, but as a slow process built through kindness and understanding. Her voice carried strength without anger. Some of the people who had doubted her began to see her differently. Daniel watched quietly from the side, feeling proud without needing to say it aloud. After the gathering ended, Elena sat by the fire pit, looking peaceful. "I never thought I would stand in front of people again without feeling afraid," she said. "You did more than stand," Daniel replied. "You showed them who you really are." She looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. The following week brought another test. A letter arrived for Elena, reminding her of responsibilities she had left behind. She read it slowly, her expression serious. "I can't ignore this forever," she said. Daniel nodded. "You don't have to face it alone." Together they discussed her options, focusing on solutions rather than fear.
Helena realized that she no longer wanted to run.
She wanted closure, not to erase the past, but to move forward with peace. The decision to face unfinished matters changed her posture and energy. She walked with confidence, spoke with clarity, and allowed herself moments of laughter that felt genuine and free. One evening, while sitting on the porch, she turned to Daniel. "Why did you help me that first day?" she asked. He thought for a moment before answering. "Because I recognized something in you, someone who needed a place to breathe." She nodded slowly. "You gave me more than shelter. You gave me time to remember who I am." He smiled quietly. "You did the hard work yourself." As the days passed, the ranch felt alive with purpose. Elena planted a small garden near the house, bringing color and life to the land. Daniel repaired an old section of the barn that he had ignored for years. Together, they created a space that reflected both of them, steady, calm, and hopeful. Yet challenges still appeared. Some people in town continued to question Elena's presence. Instead of hiding, she chose to visit town again, walking beside Daniel with quiet confidence. She greeted people respectfully, answering questions honestly without sharing more than she felt comfortable with. Gradually, the atmosphere changed. Curiosity replaced suspicion. Respect replaced doubt. One afternoon, as they drove back from town, Elena looked out the window at the endless fields. "I used to think healing meant forgetting everything," she said. "But now I see it's about carrying the past without letting it control you." Daniel nodded. "That sounds right." As the sun began to set, they returned to the ranch. The sky glowed with soft colors, and the wind moved gently across the land. Elena stepped out of the truck and paused, taking in the view. For the first time since arriving, she felt completely present. Part 4 closed with a powerful sense of growth. Elena had faced the shadows of her past and chosen courage over fear. The ranch had become more than a safe place. It was a foundation for a new life built on trust, understanding, and quiet strength. Daniel, once isolated by loneliness, found purpose in standing beside someone who had rediscovered her voice. Together they moved toward a future that felt real, grounded, and full of possibility. The seasons began to change slowly, and with them came a quiet transformation across the ranch. The air felt warmer, the grass greener, and the long days carried a sense of renewal that both Daniel and Elena could feel. What had started as a temporary refuge had grown into something deeper, a place where both of them had found balance again. Morning routines became shared without needing discussion. Daniel prepared coffee while Elena opened the windows to let fresh air move through the house. They worked side by side without rushing, comfortable in each other's presence. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It felt peaceful, like a steady rhythm they both understood. Elena noticed how different she felt compared to the day she first arrived. Back then, every sound had made her nervous. Every shadow felt uncertain. Now she walked across the land with calm confidence, greeting the horses with a gentle touch and speaking to them as if they were old friends. One afternoon, while repairing a section of fence together, Daniel paused and looked at her. "You move like you belong here," he said. She smiled softly.
"Maybe I do." The words surprised her as she said them, but they felt true.
The ranch was no longer just a place she had stopped on her journey. It had become part of her story. In town, people had slowly begun to accept her presence. The rumors faded as they saw her kindness and strength. She greeted neighbors with respect, helped an elderly woman carry supplies one day, and listened patiently when others spoke about their lives. Trust grew slowly but steadily. One evening, Elena received another message connected to her past. This time, she did not feel fear when reading it. Instead, she felt clarity. The unresolved parts of her life no longer felt like open wounds. They were lessons she had survived. She sat with Daniel on the porch and shared the news. "I think everything is finally settled," she said quietly. He nodded, understanding what that meant without needing details. "How do you feel?" She looked out at the open land. "Free," she said after a moment. "Not because the past disappeared, but because it no longer controls me." Daniel smiled gently, proud of how far she had come. Over the next few weeks, Elena began working on small projects that reflected her identity. She painted symbols inspired by nature onto old wooden boards, creating simple art that told stories without words. She planted more flowers around the house, bringing color to the space that had once felt empty. Daniel noticed how her presence changed not just the ranch, but also himself. He laughed more often now, spoke more openly, and allowed himself moments of joy that he had avoided for years. The loneliness that once surrounded him felt distant, replaced by quiet companionship. One afternoon, a group of neighbors visited the ranch for a small gathering. They shared food, stories, and laughter around a fire as the sun set behind the hills. Elena moved among them with ease, no longer hiding or unsure of her place. A woman from town approached her and said, "You've brought new life to this place." Elena glanced toward Daniel, who stood nearby, talking with others. I think this place brought new life to me too, she replied. As the evening ended, Daniel and Elena remained by the fire after everyone left. The flames flickered softly and the stars appeared one by one in the sky. Do you ever think about leaving? He asked gently. She considered the question carefully. I used to think I would have to keep moving, she said. But now I don't feel that need anymore. He nodded slowly, unsure how to respond, but feeling a quiet hope. Days turned into weeks, and the ranch continued to grow into a shared home. Elena started teaching local children about simple crafts and traditions connected to nature. Watching her share knowledge with patience and warmth filled Daniel with admiration. One morning, as they walked along the fence line where they had first met, Elena stopped and touched the wood gently. I remember standing here, she said softly. I felt like I had reached the end of everything. And now? He asked. She turned toward him with a calm smile. Now it feels like the beginning. The words carried meaning beyond what she spoke aloud. Their relationship had grown slowly, built on respect rather than urgency. They understood each other without needing grand gestures. Sometimes they simply sat together watching the sunset, feeling grateful for the quiet connection they shared. One evening, a storm rolled across the land. Rain fell heavily, and thunder echoed in the distance. Inside the house, they sat near the fire, listening to the sound of water against the roof. Elena spoke quietly. I used to be afraid of storms. They reminded me of chaos. And now? He asked. She looked around the room, at the warm light, the steady fire, and the calm presence beside her. Now they just feel like part of life, she said. Something that passes. Her words reflected how much she had changed. The fear that once defined her had softened into understanding. As the storm faded and the sky cleared, they stepped outside. The air smelled fresh, and the moonlight reflected on the wet ground. Elena felt a deep sense of peace she had not known in years. Thank you, she said suddenly. For what? For seeing me when I felt invisible. Daniel paused, touched by her honesty. You were never invisible, he said gently. She looked at him with quiet emotion. Maybe not anymore. Time continued forward, carrying them into a new chapter filled with steady growth. The ranch became a place where people came not only for work, but also for connection. Elena's presence brought warmth and openness, while Daniel's steady nature created a foundation of trust. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, they stood side by side watching the light spread across the land. I think this is what healing looks like, Elena said. What do you mean? Not a single moment where everything changes, she explained, but many small moments where you realize you're no longer carrying the same weight. Daniel nodded, understanding completely. The final part closed with a sense of quiet hope. Two people who once felt broken had found strength through patience and kindness. The ranch, once a symbol of isolation, had become a place of renewal. Elena no longer feared being hurt, because she trusted her own strength. And Daniel no longer faced the world alone. Together, they stepped into a future built not on perfect promises, but on shared understanding, proving that healing is not about forgetting the past. It is about creating a life strong enough to carry it with peace.